The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Article number 32, Application of the Charter. This Charter applies to the Parliament and Government of Canada, in respect of all matters within the authority of the Parliament. Now, B. This Charter applies to the legislature and government of each province and in respect of all matters within the authority of the legislature of each province. Notwithstanding, subsection 1, section 15 shall not have effect. Section 33. Parliament or the legislature of a province may expressively declare in an act of Parliament or of the legislature, as the case may be, that the act or provision thereof shall operate notwithstanding a provision included in section 2 or section 7, 215 of this charter. This charter. Section 2 of the charter. Everyone, the subject or the player is everyone, not every person or every citizen, but everyone has the following fundamental freedoms. Now you scroll down, freedom of association. You see it? Freedom of association. When you look into the Highway Safety Code, this is an enactment, a regulation that has been given force of law by the legislator who wrote up these laws, and then subsequently it was given force of law. Now in it, you find the word motor vehicle. And a motor vehicle means a motorized road vehicle primarily. Now notice that indication, primarily adapted for the transportation of persons or property. That's the description of a motor vehicle, that its use is primarily. So if they're using the word primarily, that means there has to be a secondary capacity, or even a subsequent to secondary capacity. It means that the nature or the use is more than one. Otherwise, why did they use the distinction primarily? Now it says that within this law here that they created, the Highway Safety Code, it says that they have to make sure that they respect the rights and freedoms that are guaranteed in the Charter. The legislator, when he drew up this Highway Safety Code, he was under obligation to make sure that the rights and freedoms that were articulated or enumerated in the Constitution Act of Canada 1982 find their expression in this law. And if they don't, if they were going to strip us or if they were going to remove those rights in this code, they had to subsequently inform us in the code that said, we are removing certain fundamental rights and freedoms that are available in section 2 and 7 to 15 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and even though we're removing them, it's still applying this law upon you, and you have no say about it. They didn't do that in this code. So therefore, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that are found in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms are expressed in here. Now what is one of those charter rights? It is the right to association. You cannot be forced to associate with anybody or any company. When these legislators, when they make up their enactments, they must make sure that the expressions of the Charter are contained in the enactments. They must preserve the freedoms or the rights that are present in the Charter within the enactments. Now more specifically, they must preserve Article 2 and Article 7 to 15 of the Charter. So if they intend to remove the right or freedom in the enactment, they must clearly state this fact in the enactment themselves. If they are intending to remove any freedoms, they have to state so in that enactment. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Article 2, states that everyone has the freedom of association. The Society of Automobile of Quebec is a corporation. This is where you register a motor vehicle. The Highway Safety Code is an enactment that governs or controls this society. The police enforce this society's codes on persons. In the Highway Safety Code, you do not find that it is declared that this enactment, this code, will operate notwithstanding a provision included in Section 2 or Section 7 to 15 of the Charter, as Act would have obligation to declare if that was the intention. No, we clearly do not find any indication in the Highway Safety Code that our charter rights are being removed. I, as a human being, have the right to freedom of association. This is a protected and guaranteed right. I cannot be forced into association. The police will respond to someone who is exercising their charter right by saying you cannot drive a motor vehicle if you do not do it with a license, which means that you are in association with the Automobile Society. If you do not have a license, then you have no right to drive or to travel at all. That will be their position. When you apply for a permit to drive with the Automobile Society, you are applying and operating under the designation of a person. You have subjected yourself to their rules and regulations. You have become part of their society, and the police can indeed enforce those codes upon persons. If you do not apply for a permit or license, the police will take a stand against you, trying to enforce the Highway Safety Code upon you, saying that you are obligated to the code. Well, officer, I am exercising my right to choose who to associate with, and I choose not to associate with the Automobile Society. They won't understand. Most of them, that is, they have been indoctrinated by the education that they have received, which completely failed to teach them the rights and freedoms of a human being. I, as a human being, have a right to choose who I will associate with and who I will obligate myself to. That right is recognized in international law and is expressed in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now the question remains, can I use a motor vehicle or any vehicle without having to be in association with the Automobile Society? Now when you look specifically in the Quebec Highway Safety Code, it says for the purpose of this code, the word person also includes a partnership. So it's clearly stating that the word person is referring to a legal person, an artificial person, which comes out in the complete context or operation of law as we continue on. In the code it says that the person driving a road vehicle or having care or control of a road vehicle must carry his license. So the designation or the one that is driving is a person. Now 98. The holder of a license must comply with the conditions attached to his license. Now we know that 102. Every person referred to in sections 97, 99, and 100 must surrender his license for inspection at the request of a peace officer. The peace officer must return the license to its holder as soon as he has inspected it. So it's very clear that the subject or the player in the Highway Safety Code is indeed a person. Now when you go into the Financial Administration Act of Canada, which is a federal act, you're going to read the following. Charges for rights and privileges. The Governor and Council may, on the recommendation of the Treasury Board, A. By regulation, prescribe fees or charges to be paid for a right or privilege conferred by or on behalf of Her Majesty in right of Canada by means of license, permit, or other authorization by the persons or classes of persons on whom the right or privilege is conferred. So here it is granting the right to charge for a privilege in the form of a permit or a license. And that's what you see being expressed in the Highway Safety Code, in the automobile societies. They're classifying us, human beings, as persons, and they're applying fees against us in the form of permits and license in order to operate this right that they're giving to a person. But in no way, shape, or form is a human being obligated to associate with these automobile, if you will say, corporations. Now specifically in Quebec, if you look here where it gives a description of a motor vehicle, it says motor vehicle means a motorized road vehicle primarily adapted for the transportation of persons or property. Now notice that they use the word primarily as a descriptive form. So if they say it's primarily, that means then there's secondary capabilities to whatever this motor vehicle is. So let's look at it. If it's primarily for the transportation of persons and you use it in a secondary capacity as a human being, what obligation is there that rests upon you to have a license as a human being? There's none. And that here will be the expression of your charter right that says you don't have to be held in association. So if I wanted to get into a motor vehicle, for example, that was had its registration with the SAAQ. That's what we call it here in Quebec. It had its registration plate on it, and it was insured. The motor vehicle was insured. And I got in it and started to drive it as a human being, and a police officer pulled me over and wanted to see my license. Well, the only one that he could get a license from is every person. He could only ask that class of person for the license. And if I state I'm a human being using the road vehicle in a secondary capacity, that's my right. And you know why that's my right? Because I'm able to use the motor vehicle without myself as a human being being held in association to the automobile corporation. Even though the vehicle, let's say for example, I'll just give you a clearer example. If my mom had a vehicle, now my mother personally doesn't drive, but if my mom had a vehicle and it was registered and had a registration plate and had insurance with the Quebec automobile insurance companies, I would be allowed as a human being to drive that motor vehicle in a secondary capacity. And using that vehicle in a secondary capacity, I wouldn't have an obligation to have a license because I wouldn't be operating as a person. And this expression of law is my right, and it's my guaranteed charter right. It's my guaranteed charter right, and the fact that it's still in the Highway Safety Code proves even more that they didn't remove it. And we know that if they were going to remove it, they would have had to mention it in the code, and they didn't. So when we go into the code looking for the right, we clearly find it there. It's hidden in a little wording that if you don't know what to look for, you're going to bypass it, but it's there. Now this is not talking about, how do you say that, private conveyance.
But if it was Quebec, the legal entity, then it would be in contradiction by the fact that it is Canada, which is a nation as a legal entity within the country. But if it was Quebec, the legal entity, then it would be in contradiction by the fact that it is Canada, which is a nation as a legal entity. If it was Quebec, the legal entity, then it would be in contradiction.
Very clear. Canada and Quebec are considered a legal entity, a legal person, a corporation under law. All my quotes are from my black laws and include to confine within, to hold as an enclosure, take in, attain, shut up, contain, and enclose. Now we read down, inclusio unius e exclusio alterius. The inclusion of one is exclusion of another. The certain designation of one person is an absolute exclusion of all others. Again, the inclusion of one is the exclusion of another. Inclusio unius e exclusio alterius. The inclusion of one is the exclusion of another. The certain designation of one person is an absolute exclusion of all others. Again, expressio unius e exclusio alterius. Law, a canon of construction holding that to express or include one thing implies the exclusion of the other or of the alternate. Again, a canon of construction holding that to express or include one thing implies the exclusion of the other or of the alternative. This is the Highway Safety Code of Canada. It's applicable in Quebec. Now notice Article 5. It says, for the purpose of this code, the word person also includes a partnership, and the words farm machine include a farm tractor. Now, let's deconstruct this sentence. For the purpose of this code, the word person also includes, notice the plural, okay? They could have said also include a partnership. They didn't. They wrote includes a partnership, and the words farm machine include a farm tractor. So the word there include is different than the word includes. And as you saw in Black's Law Dictionary, they're trying to say that the word person in this highway safety code, it only indicates a partnership. A partnership is a legal person, a legal entity, a corporation. So when you see the word person here in this code, it's referring to a corporation or your legal entity or the one that's performing the civil duty and not the man or the woman. So we see in the highway safety code in Article 5, it says the word person also includes a partnership. Now what the heck are they trying to say here with these funky words? Here, remember the word includes, as we learned in Black's Law Dictionary, there's an S here. So when they use this term and they're saying also includes with an S, it means it excludes everything else. Whatever's mentioned after this word is the only thing they're referring to. Now here they says also includes a partnership. Well, a partnership is, in law, a legal person. A juridical personality, corporation. So it's very clear. They're saying the word person in the highway safety code, it means a partnership, it means legal person, juridical person, or corporation. Person. Not man, not woman, but person. And here's the game they're playing with includes. If there was no S here, then that would leave it open to leave different designations to what the word person means. But because they put an S here, as we saw in Black Law's Dictionary, this is an inclusive term. It means whatever is mentioned, nothing else can follow. What's mentioned is partnership. Therefore, it applies only to your juridical personality, which isn't a surprise because that's how they're playing this game with us. As you saw in Black Law's Dictionary, the word include. Every time you see the word include in law, it means this object, whatever they're speaking about after the word include, plus others. Not just the object that's mentioned. Other things also can be included. When you ever see the word mentioned includes with an S, they're referring to that in the inclusio unius e exclusio alterius, which means that whatever's mentioned after the word includes with an S, that's it. So if it says includes partnership, meaning legal person, that's all. That's what it's referring to. You can't add more to what is described. If it was with the word include, then you could add more objects. But the fact that there's an S, it's an inclusive description of what they're talking about. So that's an important aspect or an important concept to remember, because within the laws and the statutes, regulations, and what we're dealing with, they use these contexts hoping that we don't understand the meaning of them and where they come from. So every time you see the word includes, it's descriptive only of what it's describing. It's not left open. And the Latin phrase for that, again, is inclusio unius e exclusio alterius, which means that whatever's mentioned, nothing else can be added. We're still in the Highway Safety Code. We're in the Interpretation Act, where it describes what their words mean. Here, motor vehicle, you see it? Means a motorized road vehicle, listen, primarily adapted for the transportation of persons or property. So, a road vehicle is primarily for the transportation of persons. Scroll down. Road vehicle. A road vehicle means a motor vehicle. Well, you just read what a motor vehicle is. That can be driven on a highway, other than a vehicle that runs on rails, or a power-assisted bicycle, or an electrically propelled wheelchair, a trailer, a semi-trailer, or a detached axle is defined as a road vehicle. So, a road vehicle means motor vehicle. So what does a motor vehicle mean? A motor vehicle, as you see, means a motorized road vehicle primarily adapted for transportation of persons and properties. Now we go for passenger vehicle. A passenger vehicle means a motor vehicle designed for the transportation of not more than 9 occupants at the time, where such transportation does not require a permit from the Commission de Transport de Quebec. Big long sentence for nothing. It says a passenger vehicle means a motor vehicle. So, a motor vehicle, as we saw before, boom, means a motorized road vehicle. Now, its primary use is for transportation of persons, juridical personalities, legal persons, or corporations. So your road vehicle, your passenger vehicle, all under law are considered a motor vehicle. And a motor vehicle, it doesn't transport a man and a woman or a human being. It transports persons or properties. Very clear. So as you saw in the Highway Safety Code, it says that a motor vehicle is for primary use for the transportation of persons and property. Now the persons they're referring to is your juridical personality, your legal person, again, the code says a passenger vehicle, then it says means a motor vehicle. And the description of a motor vehicle, again, primary use for the transportation of a person or property. Then it says a road vehicle. It goes on to state that a road vehicle means a motor vehicle. And a motor vehicle is for the primary use for the transportation of a person or property. So whether you want to say you're driving a road vehicle, a passenger vehicle, or a motor vehicle, what you're actually declaring is that its use is for the transportation of your person and your property. So never in this context are you saying that you're traveling as a man or a woman. And that's how they're bounding us up with the Highway Safety Code, by playing with words. Highway Safety Code, Article 3, it says the person in whose name a road vehicle is registered. So, a person, a juridical personality, a legal person, a partnership, it's that name that's registered the vehicle, and the road vehicle, its primary use is for the transportation of the person or the property. So, it's not a man, not a woman. So when you register your road vehicle, your motor vehicle, or your passenger vehicle, you're saying that your juridical personality, the one that's attached to your human, according to Quebec Civil Code, that's the one whose name the road vehicle will be registered in. In the Highway Safety Code, a road vehicle means a motor vehicle. A passenger vehicle means a motor vehicle. And a motor vehicle means a road vehicle primarily adapted for transportation of persons or property. Those are the terms and definitions. Now, in the Criminal Code of Canada, motor vehicle means a vehicle that is drawn or propelled or driven by any means other than muscular power, but does not include the railway equipment. So as you see, we have two different codes, two different laws. Both have the same term in it, motor vehicle, yet both have distinct and different definitions of what a motor vehicle means. Now, it's up to you who are out there in the public to decide what a motor vehicle means for you and what accountability you have to the SAAQ, because they are playing games with words and terminologies, as you see here. So, in the Highway Safety Code, motor vehicle, the definition, the term it means, when you say the word motor vehicle, you are describing something that is primarily for the transport of a person. So if you ever say, I'm in a motor vehicle, And if you're saying it under the Highway Safety Code, that's what you're declaring. Motor vehicle, under the Criminal Code of Canada, it says that it's drawn or driven by any means other than muscular force. So if you ever say that I'm in a motor vehicle, according to the Criminal Code of Canada, it's not the same thing as a motor vehicle in the Highway Safety Code. You see, the two terms are the same, but the definitions are different. Now, how did they get you and me, or how did they get juridical personalities to say that they are in a motor vehicle according to the Highway Safety Code? Black laws. Voluntary conveyance. A conveyance made without valuable consideration, such as a deed in the favor of a relative. 5. A means of transport, a vehicle. So when you say voluntary conveyance, you are saying it's a means of transport, it's a vehicle. So, as you saw in black laws, there was something that was called a voluntary conveyance. That's the term, the legal definition. It's considered a private conveyance. And it means a means of transport, it's a vehicle. Okay, that's the designation, that's the term. Now, in the Highway Safety Code, the terms that we find are passenger vehicle, motor vehicle, and road vehicle. These terms are found in the Highway Safety Code. So we go into the Highway Safety Code, into the interpretation section. This is the section before the code starts. This is where you find the definition of words or terms. Definition. Now, in that interpretation section, it will tell you, it will explain to you what a motor vehicle, what a passenger vehicle, or what a road vehicle is under the Highway Safety Code. It will say that these three are all considered a motor vehicle under this code. So whether you say I have a road, a motor, or a passenger vehicle, you are declaring that you have a motor vehicle. And all of these three are for the primary transport of persons and property, according to the Highway Safety Code. So you may think, whatever definition you want to have of a car, of a road vehicle, of a passenger vehicle, but what the law considers it, you'll find it in the Interpretation Act of the Highway Safety Code, declaring what a motor, a road, and a passenger vehicle is, as you saw in part 1 of this video. It's through the act of registration, when you go to the SAQ and you register your vehicle, that you transform and you render your vehicle a road, motor, or passenger vehicle under the Highway Safety Code. And the Highway Safety Code, it applies to your motor, road, or passenger vehicle. It's only when you go and register your private vehicle that you are agreeing to change the designation, or you are agreeing to change the terms of your vehicle into something that is called either a motor, road, or passenger vehicle. When you do that, then they can govern you and regulate you. If you don't bring your vehicle to the SAQ and ask for registration, they can't govern you. Now there's conditions for your vehicle to be registered, which means there are terms, there are things that you have to do in order for your vehicle to be considered a motor, passenger, or road vehicle. If you don't fulfill these obligations, if you don't fulfill these stipulations that the SAQ want you to perform, then you cannot be considered to be driving a motor vehicle, a passenger vehicle, or a road vehicle. And here are the stipulations that you must do in order to change the designation of your motor vehicle. To obtain the registration of a road vehicle and put the vehicle into operation on a public highway. So notice it says to obtain the registration of a road vehicle. So what they want you to register is a road vehicle. It says 1. You must comply with the conditions and formalities established by the regulation. And number 3, pay the fees fixed by regulation and duties fixed by regulation. So, if you want to have your vehicle, your private conveyance, your voluntary conveyance considered a road vehicle, a passenger vehicle, or a motor vehicle, you must comply with the conditions and the formalities established by the regulation, and you must pay fixes and fees and fixed by the regulation. If you do not complete these duties, then you have no right to call your vehicle, or no one has a right to call your vehicle a road vehicle, a passenger vehicle, or a motor vehicle, according to the Highway Safety Code. So, if you comply with the conditions that the SAQ says in the Highway Safety Code, and if you pay fees, if you pay the money, then you have the right, you have the duty to call your private vehicle a motor, a passenger, or a road vehicle. But if you don't comply with their conditions, and if you don't pay their fees, then your private conveyance, your vehicle, does not fall under the terms of the Highway Safety Code and does not fall under the governing powers of the SAAQ, because you have failed to register your vehicle. When you hear terms like license, permit, road vehicle, motor vehicle, passenger vehicle, these are all coming from the Highway Safety Code, and the terms from the Highway Safety Code and the Interpretation Act. And all this here only applies if, conditional, if you've registered your vehicle. Because if you've registered your vehicle, then you've changed the designation, you've changed the title of your vehicle under law, and it now has become a road vehicle, a motor vehicle, or a passenger vehicle. And it requires you to have a permit, and it requires you to have a license and insurance. However, if you did not register your vehicle because you chose not to, you kept it for the man or the woman as a private conveyance, if anybody tries to use these terms against you, they're not applicable to you, because you have not fulfilled the conditions, which is paying the fees and complying with the code. Driver's license. The certificate or license issued by a state which authorizes a person to operate a motor vehicle. Generally, a written and driving examination is required for obtaining such. So, this certificate or license is issued, and it authorizes a person, not a man and woman, to operate a motor vehicle. Now notice the distinction. It doesn't say just a vehicle, it says a motor vehicle. So it's time again now for Canada to give a report about how they are doing concerning the implementation of human rights and fundamental freedoms here within Canada. Their date of report is actually going to be April 23rd, 2013. Now there are 3 countries that are subject to judge them, which are the Philippines, Brazil, and Ireland. Here what you're looking at is a report that they sent to the international community. Universal Periodic Review of Canada, National Report. Canada's second report under the Universal Periodic Review 2013. Now, I want to read a few segments of this report. It's a pretty long report, but I want to encourage some people by what I'm about to share. Now here, first of all, in introduction, it says that the Canadian society is characterized by values such as freedom, great, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. These values are the strength of our country. Well, okay, we accept that you're saying that. Now I'm going to click specifically on enhancing awareness of human rights and implementation mechanisms. Now, before I go on, I want to tell you a story. There is a woman, and I'm going to show you her here. Her name is Irit Weiser. This woman here is the head of the department that works for human rights and fundamental freedoms for Justice Canada. Now, on the website it states here, we're also responsible for international human rights and law. That's what it states here. And it says, ask Irit Weiser to describe what she likes best about her work as Director of Human Rights Law Section, and you'll get more than one answer. In fact, you'll get several. And then, first of all, she says, the subject matter is fascinating. Though we're a specialized unit, we work on a wide range of issues, touching literally every area of public policy, now you're hearing that, and how that policy is integrated into legislation. Now I'm going to scroll down a little bit more, and I'm going to show you the next paragraph. It says, IRIT and her team of approximately 20 lawyers. So they provide legal advice to the government and litigation support to the Crown Council on human rights issues. More specifically, she says, they offer advice on matters relating to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Canadian Bill of Rights, and the Canadian Human Rights Act. In Canada, there is an obligation upon the state party, Canada, to allow the expression of human rights and fundamental freedoms within the operation of Canada. This is an international obligation. It's supposed to come out through domestic legislation. Now, this woman here says that her team of lawyers, that she offers advice in litigations and she supports the Crown Council on human rights issue. So her and her lawyers are the one that are, if you will, occupying or handling or giving advice on the dossiers that are being sent or being brought forth before the federal courts and the Supreme Courts concerning human rights issues. There is an obligation upon the state party here in Canada to teach public officers and to teach police officers and to teach military officers and basically all officers that support or work on behalf of this government about human rights and fundamental freedoms. It was an obligation. They were supposed to have mechanisms in place that would teach these public servants the expression of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Now, if any of you are familiar with a man named Dean Clifford, he has his own website and he has his own YouTube channel. You can go there and watch his videos. He recently got pulled over by some police officers. And he was speaking with the police officers and he was explaining to them that he was actually exercising his human rights and fundamental freedoms. That he was operating in a private capacity as a human being, and therefore the rules and the regulations that apply to the person, to the public officer, to that Canadian citizen was not applicable upon him. And he called on the Canadian Bill of Rights. He called on that before them. And the officers actually mocked him. And they laughed and they said, "This is not America. We don't have a Bill of Rights here in Canada. This is not America." So just that expression, in that interaction between those officers and Mr. Clifford, you see that Canada is failing to teach their officers about human rights and fundamental freedoms. That when someone is engaged with a public officer and he's trying to express his rights and freedoms, they don't even know or they don't even understand what is being expressed. This is a sad situation when there's an obligation that they should be taught. Now, more and more in Canada, it seems that there's a bigger movement that's coming about here, and people are realizing that, hey, hang on, I've had human rights and freedoms all along, and you stripped me of them, and you've never told me of them, and you had an obligation to do so. Now, in this report in 2013 that Canada has produced, I want to just draw your attention a little bit to what they're saying here. Now, in Article 8, it says, governments have focused significant efforts on deepening knowledge of Canada's commitments among who? Public servants, and strengthening their capacity to consider these issues in their work. The Government of Canada has developed general training for federal public servants on these issues, as well as training tailored to specific departments. These now look at that, these new training models have been shared with provincial and territory governments. So nevertheless, they're saying now in 2013 that there is something that's going on. Right now, the government has focused significant efforts, on teaching their public servants and strengthening their capacity to consider these issues in their work. Anyone who has anything to say about human rights and fundamental freedoms can send a report to this council before the end of March, and they can express what they've experienced here in Canada concerning their human rights and fundamental freedoms. That's an option that you have available to you. And if you seem to be having too much trouble within the court systems or within dealing with public officers and trying to exercise your human rights and fundamental freedoms, well, wouldn't it be a logical next step to contact Irit Weiser, who's working for the justice system, the federal justice system of Canada? If she specializes and she's in a specialized unit concerning human rights and fundamental freedoms and their international implementation here in Canada, well, It's just sad to see that all this is going on, and still when one individual wants to stand up, he's forced to go through the courts and fight for his rights and freedoms.